Hello, everybody. My name is Alexis, and welcome to Astro Anecdotes, an astrology podcast where I do whatever the fuck I want. And today's episode is going to be about the astrology of Avatar, The Last Airbender. I'm here today with Adina Hertzel, and this is the second episode recorded at 5:54 p.m. Central Standard Time on September 3rd, 2020. So let's go ahead and get into it. But, before we talk about Avatar, let's talk about Adina, because I don't pick just anybody to be on a podcast with me. I choose the people that I think are amazing, genius, smart. Did I say genius already? I probably did. So, say hi, Adina.
Hello everyone. Oh my gosh, that was such a glowing intro. I am overwhelmed by the Libra is overwhelming.
Yeah, I tend to be that way. And, since you're on the pod with me, oh, that sounds so boomer-like. Since you're on the pod with me, tell us a little bit about yourself, tell us about your genius, your lack of genius, whatever you want the people to know.
All right, let's go. So, hello, I am Adina Hertzel. You might have seen me around on Twitter at Adina Rising, where you can also find me on Instagram, even though I'm way less active because I want to be one of those Instagram astrologers, but is very intimidating. But yeah, anyways, I am an astrologer. I focus primarily on Hellenistic astrology, but I've kind of been studying, interweaving a lot of different things. Just finished up a class with Sam Reynolds, which was amazing and super informative. But yeah, so I love astrology. I'm super passionate about astrology. I've been spending all my free time doing astrology. And outside of astrology right now, I'm working on getting a master's in clinical psychology with a spirituality focus. So really just bringing in a lot of, psychotherapy and psychology and wellness ideas into my practice, which is a relatively new thing that I've been doing consultations. So you can book a consultation with me at my website right now. I do consultations at a donation rate currently because I still am in a student place and want to, continue to hone my skills as an astrologer, working with clients and working with charts. So that's where you can find me. And I am super excited to be here on this podcast with you, Alexis.
Yay! So honestly, the reason why I chose Adina is because Adina has really hot, spicy Avatar takes. That was the first reason. And the second reason is because we've seen each other in person, I think twice now. And every time we've met up, personally for me, I am honestly always in awe on what Adina has to say online and offline. The things that she has to say about mental health and astrology, putting those two together, she has blown my mind in so many ways. And I really hope that in this episode, your minds will also be blown. And, and we're both Martians, so we're going to blow it up anyway. And yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into Avatar. So, if you were a bender, Adina, what element would you bend?
All right. So I know that I'm a water sign, and I know that means I should be a water bender, but a friend one time years ago told me that I would be like Azula and have blue fire, but be a firebender. So I've just stuck with that and I claim it, and I've decided I could be a firebender because who cares?
Wow. Okay, that makes two firebenders, because personally for me, I think in astrology, I'm literally just a big ball of fire with some air in it, but a lot of fire. And I think even in Chinese astrology, I have a lot of fire. So it clicks in both traditions. And personally, I've always seen myself as a fiery person. So if people ask me what kind of bender I would be, I would tell them that I would want to be an airbender, but I'm actually just a firebender, and that's just the story of it all. So, and also, when it comes to Avatar, personally, when I first watched Avatar, how old was I? I remembered I first watched it on the way back from a road trip from Florida all the way back to Texas when I was 8 or 9. And I watched all of book 1 at from I think 7 p.m. to maybe 3 a.m. In the car while watching with my childhood friends. And that was my very first memory of Avatar. And it was never the same afterwards. When did you first watch Avatar?
I started first started watching when I was probably 9 or 10, I think around when it was first airing. And I don't know that I ever actually finished the series as a kid because, that was back in the days when you mostly watched live TV for some crazy reason. None of us really gotten onto the phenomenon of recording and binge watching yet. But I used to watch it after school. I loved Avatar. I would play a game with my friend on the playground in elementary school where we would like choose random toys in the sandbox to decide what element we were and just pretend play as Avatar. So it was some of my positive memories from elementary school were really connected to just loving this lore and this universe and loving these characters, even though I never got to complete that journey until college when I revisited the entire series and I was like, holy shit, this still holds up.
Yeah, I recently binge watched both Avatar and Korra, and I was like, I can't believe that this series is like decently old. It's really good. And like, you can't say that for a lot of shows because some shows just don't age well, but like, I feel like Avatar is timeless. And I also feel like Avatar is one of those shows where it's like, if you liked Avatar, you're gonna like astrology. It's kind of like that same thing with like Sailor Moon, where it's like, oh, if you like Sailor Moon, you were destined to like astrology. I kind of felt like Avatar is kind of one of those shows also, just because there's like so many elements, literally elements in the show that like was so integral. So yeah, moving on, let's go ahead and talk about what you guys want to hear about, the charts. So I have Aang right up here, our main character. And this is his chart. He's a Libra ascendant, Sun in Gemini, Moon in Sagittarius, Mercury in Gemini, Venus in Leo, Mars in Cancer, Jupiter in Aquarius, and then Saturn in Taurus. So, I'm going to let you go first. What are your thoughts on this chart, your hot take on Aang, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes. So Aang discourse is always so hilarious to me because people get just so riled up by the fact that Aang wouldn't kill the Fire Lord, and we can go on a whole other tangent about whether or not Aang should have killed the Fire Lord. But I think it's definitely an interesting thing, especially all the jokes on Twitter about like all the other avatars being like, literally just kill the Fire Lord. You are allowed to kill the Fire Lord, and you should probably kill the Fire Lord because evil. And so that's always so funny to me. And I guess getting into the chart a little bit, I feel like Mars in Cancer is just so exemplified by like, oh, but I don't want to kill the Fire Lord, even though like I need, like, this is the correct thing to do. It's still this kind of resistance to actually doing the Marsy thing and trying to kind of find a way out of doing that. Definitely feels like that I think is kind of a big part of his character. And, of course, in the 10th house being a thing that he's very well known for and kind of his destiny, at least for those early years of his life.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, honestly, with a lot of people being like, why couldn't he kill the Fire Lord? And like, I feel like they were implying that like he was cowardly. I mean, he's a Libra rising. Like, if there's a better way to do it or a more painless way to get our way, we're gonna do it. Like, honestly, I was kind of glad that he didn't kill the Fire Lord. Like, I was sitting here like, don't kill the Fire Lord. There's probably a better way. And like, once he found out, oh wait, spoiler alert. Once he found out that he could take away bending, I was like, perfect, genius, the perfect way to solve a problem. And then like, honestly, I mean, I love Kiyoshi for saying no justice, no peace, but like, justice can be served in many different ways. They can taste different, they can look different. I'm willing to taste all of it. So, with his Mars and Cancer too, I definitely agree on the whole hesitance on actions, because I think the actions of an avatar are so prominent. Because, I mean, everyone rags on Korra, for example, for, not being able to save Rava and like, killing the whole line of avatars. But like, with Aang and all the other avatars, their actions are so relevant. And, with Aang, he knew that his actions mattered. Like, he knew that his actions were going to mark, a historical point in time. And I'm glad he thought about it. I'm glad that he mulled over it. I'm glad he talked about his past avatars and his friends. Like, I'm glad he thought about it because, you know, killing Ozai could have been his biggest regret. And, you know, I'm glad he thought about it. And thanks for bringing that up because, like, I didn't know I had so much fire about that take. But yeah, so like honestly, I would justify him being a Libra rising just because he's always looking for the best way out. Granted, he is a bit passive. I mean, Libra rising are just that way. And he is a bit performative because his chart ruler's in Leo in the 11th house. Like he's always trying to remain relevant without trying too hard, but he's still trying too hard. Like think of like the episode with the elephant koi fish, trying to really show off, like stuff like that. And yeah, you know, what do you think about Aang and his cute Leo Venus?
Oh my gosh, yes. He absolutely loves an audience and he loves to be the center of attention, but always in like a fun way. Like he doesn't take well to the kind of, I think he doesn't take as well to the kind of 10th house things where you have to actually have a responsibility and you have to be the one to do things. But in this 11th house where he just kind of gets to goof off and be funny and have an audience that just wants him to do whatever he wants to do, he's like having a grand old time. Especially with this Venus is opposite Jupiter in Aquarius, where there's just even more like boisterousness and buoyancy in the way he presents this rising sign. And just thinking about, I also think about like his ascendant ruler in the 11th house, kind of this devotion to community and this devotion to kind of the world as community. Like he has this 3rd house moon rejoicing and this 11th house Venus that both really like tune him into the needs of his community and the needs of his community he's building as, you know, the person who rebuilds the air nomads after Avatar and then going into Korra.
Yeah, I mean, it's really cool that you point out the opposition because I feel like in the series, they really emphasized the conflict between him serving the world, bringing balance to the world, versus him just being a kid and just enjoying life. And, you know, also when I kind of thought about the Venus-Jupiter opposition, I thought of that one episode where him and Katara were in the cave in the dark and like how awkward he was with Katara, and he was really just trying to portray that he really liked Katara, but like it didn't go well. And I just sat there, I was like, oh yeah, that's pretty Mars Jupiter opposition to me. And you know, I think what's so, you know, inspiring about Aang is that he literally had so many reasons to not end up being the person he could have been. Like, you know, his whole community was wiped out. You know, he's young, he woke up in a whole new world, cultural shock, with a bunch of people he doesn't know, and then suddenly he has to protect it. He has to protect the world, save the world. And I think, you know, his childish nature, I can kind of point to the fact that, you know, he has a Gemini sun in the 9th house and Mercury in the 9th house. For how childish he is, he's very cultured. Like, he knows so many things about various areas around the world. For example, like he knew the Fire Nation dances, held like a dance party for the Fire Nation, and then he was friends with Boomy. He went to Kyoshi Island and he was like, oh my god, Kyoshi Island, I know that place, even though he was stuck in an ice glacier for like 100 years. And, you know, I really think that, you know, Sun and Mercury in the 9th house really fits because, you know, he's also a Gemini, mainly because he never shuts up, but it's really cute. But like, you know, there is something about Aang that's so mature, but so childish at the same time. And I like that balance that it has. And I think the opposition between the sun and the moon and the Mercury and the moon kind of says a lot because, you know, with his moon in Sagittarius, you know, as you can see, he loves to have fun as a way of emotional nourishment. And, you know, because like I remembered in the earlier episodes, as soon as he went into a new area, he's like, let's have fun first before we save the world. And then once he realized like, oh wait, the weight of the world is still on my shoulders, he'll go ahead and save the world. So yeah.
Yeah, I love what you were saying about the Gemini sun and Mercury in the 9th house because, you know, there's also just a very literal association of Mercury with young people and being someone who was technically 12 years old for like 100 years is just, I feel like that's very Gemini in the ninth house, especially with Mercury being also the ruler of the 12th, in really signifying this way that he like ran away and then ended up isolated from his entire culture and people due to, living in an iceberg for 100 years. It was a part of this spiritual journey as the avatar. And also, not to, toot the horn of anybody in this podcast, but I feel like there's a sense of like refinement with people born under the full moon, that like there's a kind of completion of ideas, which is very representative of the full moon is, which does, like, the Gemini Sagittarius axis is still like very fun, it's very useful, it's very like curious, but there is that kind of sense of culturedness as well as curiousness, particularly with Sagittarius involved as well. And then Jupiter in Aquarius, just like a real sense of learning and gaining joy through knowledge and being able to sort of hold this completeness and hold this duality of like curiosity, but also intelligence. It's, yeah, very like lots of smartness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what's super interesting is that he was in the iceberg for when he was 12. So basically, he was trapped in his, not technically trapped in his Jupiter return for 100 years, but it's almost like when he came out of the iceberg, he's like, oh, time to resume my Jupiter return. Even though by the time you're 100, you're supposed to be going through like past like a million Saturn returns and like all these transits, but like he hasn't felt those transits or experienced those transits, even though time has passed by. I think one thing is really interesting is that his Jupiter in the 5th house is square to Saturn by sign. And, whenever he ran away to, to be a kid again. Like Jupiter in the 5th house, like the 5th house covers children. It doesn't get more literal than that. And I think we chose Saturn in the 8th house just because, like, the weight of responsibility is something that kind of plagued Aang in the very beginning of the show. And Saturn is the lord of the 4th house and the 5th house. When I think of the 8th house, I think of exploitation. I think of taking advantage of somebody. I think of societal obligations. And I think we put Saturn in the 8th house just because we were kind of like, that sounds like the Fire Nation. Like, that's the Fire Nation coming in and literally taking away his home life and his sense of joy so that he can go about and, save the world. And like, with all of that, I mean, that's where the weight of responsibility is really interesting, because the lord of the 8th house is Venus in the 11th house. He feel like the weight is literally from the community, and he has to be the poster face of bringing balance to the world when he didn't choose to. And I thought it was really interesting that Jupiter is square to Saturn, because it's almost like, the things that come easily to him, which is having fun, doesn't really help him save the world.
Yeah, those are such great points. And with Saturn in the 8th, I think one thing we should mention is that we did do a bunch of math to try to calculate what Saturn signs like Aang could have and Iroh could have based on where we started with the main group that was all born within a few years of each other. So we did some math. These charts could technically all work in the real world. Like, none of the planets are in a place that they couldn't be. So these are all possible real charts. Just wanted to shout us out for doing that. But yeah, I think with the Saturn Jupiter square, there's, it's a square with reception. So Saturn is ultimately kind of receiving Jupiter. And another piece of the 8th house is, this implication of inheritance. And of course, the avatar is technically, in a way, a thing he inherited, and a big part of his responsibility, his sense of duty, his core foundation is in this inherited thing that also, of course, has these 9th house implications, but is something that was ultimately passed down from the dead, because the avatar is, of course, born when another avatar dies. And it is also interesting that Saturn is exalted in Libra, which is Aang's ascendant. So there is another way that Saturn is kind of watching over him, and is in this Saturn in the 8th, it's a big part of who he is.
Yeah, definitely. And like, I think a lot of people tend to forget like Aang has so much weight on his shoulders. Like I know that his only opponent was literally, the Fire Lord, but like it was heavy for him. And sometimes like I think it's a bit, I guess, one-dimensional to argue that he's just an immature boy who doesn't know anything. And like it's true, he is definitely those things. But at the same time though, like there is a lot of wisdom and like culturedness in him that just makes him different. So, personally, I think I'm pretty set on going to our next character. Do you have any extra words? Are you ready to go to our next person?
I think we really covered a lot of why we made this chart for Aang and got a little deeper into his psyche than people sometimes do. So yeah, let's keep going.
Okay, so drum roll. Our next person is going to be boop. Oh, that was anticlimactic. Okay, I have to scroll with the mouse, not with the keyboard. So, Katara, the love interest, Aang's love interest, the best female character. Well, I don't know if it's the best. No, you know what? That's a debate. I'll save that later. So, here's Katara's chart. She is a Scorpio ascendant, Sun in Cancer, Moon in Aries, Mercury in Cancer, Venus in Virgo, Mars in Leo, Jupiter in Cancer, and then Saturn in Virgo. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I have so many thoughts about Katara. Let me get on my soapbox.
Woo!
First of all, I am very attached to Katara because when I was younger and watching Avatar, she was, of course, my favorite character. I loved her like feminism, her anger at men, her like resistance to all of the established roles she's been given as a woman and as a woman in like her particular culture. And being a member of some Avatar Facebook groups, I see a lot of, the way men get angry about Katara and hate Katara. That just makes me love her more because she is a fantastic character. And one thing that, bothers me about all the discourse about Katara, so this is my second point, especially when it comes to like takes I see about the astrology of Katara, is people seem to only ever emphasize her as a waterbender, as a healer, as someone emotional, and someone who's very caretaking, maternal. And I find that people really emphasize signs like Cancer, Virgo, really like focus on these traits of Katara and seem to completely forget that she's just as much a warrior as she is a healer. And that when she went to the Northern Water Tribe, she was told, go be a healer with the other women. And she said, hell no, I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm going to learn to fight. Like, we're in a war, I'm going to fight. And there is this entire martial side to her that I think gets overlooked so frequently. And it almost feels like people are creating this caricature of her that reminds me of the Ember Island players version of Katara instead of giving space for her entire character, because she is a nurturer and a healer who had to take on a maternal role in her tribe and a maternal role in her family despite being the youngest after she lost her mother. But yeah, she also has this fighting side and this fighting spirit and set out on this journey with the Avatar. So like she's so much more complicated than I think people give her credit for, and I feel very strongly about that.
Yeah, I mean, personally, my opinion of Katara has been a journey because at first I kind of look at Katara and I'm like, look, I relate to you, but I also don't like you. And I felt that way for a while. And then I was just like, you know what? I think the only reason why I hate Katara is because she triggers my mommy issues. And that's just not fair. And, I mean, I'm being completely honest because whenever she was so motherly and naggy in particular, I was just sitting there like, oh my God, I need to make my own earthbending tent and put it right next to Toph and like just chill out. And you're completely right though, because when people just kind of pin Katara as just like this really, docile, healing, motherly kind of person, I just look and I'm like, she's kind of spicy. Like she's like really spicy. And I think we kind of compromised anyway. Like 5 of her planets are in Cancer and in Virgo. However, they gave her an Aries moon, a Scorpio ascendant, and then Leo Mars. Like, I mean, don't get us wrong. She is still that, healy, maternal kind of person, but she's definitely super spicy and a lot more spicier than people would like to admit. And it actually shows up in the show. So let me like actually start with the spiciness. So Katara is really known, in my opinion, to be really charismatic. Like, I don't know how many motivational speeches and TED Talks that she had throughout the show, but like she had a lot of motivational speeches. Like she literally just like took up the mantle and she's like, it's time for me to say my words. And that is to me the epitome of having your chart ruler in the 10th house in Leo as a Scorpio ascendant. Like, I mean, how many episodes? Like she tried to talk to prisoners in, I think with Haku and his father, I think. And so that's one episode. The other episode is like literally how she tries to like talk to Aang or literally advising any character. You know what? Because she's a Leo Mars, if you don't take her seriously, she takes it really personally. But you know, we'll get that with her Aries moon. But like there are numerous episodes where Katara has been a vocal leader and she's been really in your face that I don't think people talk about enough. And it really defines her as a character.
I totally agree. Like she has such a leadership potential, and she has a maturity, for better or for worse, that really like gives her a powerful role in this group. Because I mean, let's be honest, without her, Aang and Sokka would probably never get anything done.
Oh yeah.
Like, yeah, they would be all over the place. Like Sokka would have some new crazy ideas chasing. Aang would find some new kids to worship him in whatever town they go to. Like they would, I don't think they'd ever stay on track. But
yeah. I think what's really cool is that she has like 3 planets in Cancer in the 9th house. Like the whole show is about her traveling the world. Like she's literally on an air bison for the majority of the show. But it's interesting because the lord of her 9th house is the moon in the 6th house. And her moon in the 6th house is probably the funniest thing I think of when it comes to Katara, because whenever she feels a certain way, you don't have to look very far whenever Katara is mad at you or is feeling a certain way with you. For example, like it can go from her talking to Toph about how she can't see the stars at night and she's being super petty in that one episode when her and Toph are trying to, you know, get used to each other. It could literally be like that. Or it can go to the Painted Lady episode where she is literally trying to empower a town that she did not live in. Like I feel like that's super moon in the 6th house to me. And also when Katara gets angry, like she literally like water bends as she's angry, as demonstrated in the first episode. Like you can literally see her emotions just like burst out. And you know, that's partly why she's super spicy. But it's interesting to see how her spiciness has applied in various episodes and how it's been showed. And honestly, with the moon in the 6th house, whenever I tell clients that have this placement, my boyfriend has this in Placidus. I literally tell him, your work ethic depends on how you feel. And a lot of how Katara feels really depends on how she does in the show. So whenever she's motivated, things will always get done. But that's my take on her moon.
yes. Oh my gosh. As you were talking, I just thought about 2 different Katara anecdotes. Like, first of all, just thinking about the 6th house, like there is so much there about like, yeah, struggles, relationships to power. Like for QAC and Kirsten YWZ, I believe how you pronounce their name, gave a talk about the 6th and the 12th houses and talked about like the 6th and relating to structures of power and trying to organize and heal a town that's been taken over by the Fire Nation. Totally has the 6th house connotations, but yeah, with the Painted Lady. But yeah, the things that really stood out to me also with the moon in the 6th being in Aries is that it really does represent that warrior healer archetype that she embodies. And even just thinking about her healing abilities, she discovers those after being burned by fire, like having her body, her hands physically burned by Aang attempting to firebend. And then that's how she discovers that she has this ability to heal. And just thinking about the 6th house and the associations with health, the body, medicine, like these things come about for her through fire. And also we see her healing Zuko. We see a lot of fire, like her trying to heal fire with water and temper fire. And oh gosh, what's the other? No, oh yeah, the other, with that really not being able to work when she's feeling off. I just think about, when she was trying to teach Aang waterbending and he was doing so well, and you could see some of her jealousy. And this is also a moon by Mars and Leo, so it's kind of like I want to be the best and I'm not the best right now, so I'm gonna go sulk about that because I want to be better. And then of course goes and steals a waterbending scroll and everything, acts like a very impulsive Aries moon all throughout that episode.
Oh yeah. You know what's really interesting on what you mentioned? I just now realized that Katara never healed wounds that came from earthbenders or airbenders. Granted, there's not any other airbenders, so I mean there's a reason for that. But I mean also we don't have any like evil earthbenders in the show besides the Dai Li, but the Dai Li never did anything. I know the main enemy is the Fire Lord and the Fire Nation, so it's kind of like, fire wounds, but like I think it's super interesting that Mars is the lord of the 6th house, and the 10th house is literally what the world knows. And like literally one of the most pivotal moments in the show was when Azula struck Aang with lightning whenever he was in his avatar state. And like if it weren't for Katara's healing, he would have been gone. Mm. And that's like, to me, that shows like, the most, I guess, popular, or I guess the most notable healing that she did. With, Mars being the lord of the 6th house and all that going on. So that really, and the fact that it's only fire, I'm just kind of like, interesting. So yeah, do you have anything else you want to say? Actually, we haven't even talked about her Venus and her Saturn. So, her Venus and Virgo, I don't know how to like explain this without sounding super snarky, but like, I feel like every character is annoying for one little thing, because like you would have a Mary Sue if you had a character that was never annoying, okay? And for Katara, the way that she tries to like overly mother, especially when it came to Toph most notably, it like drove me nuts. Cause like when I think about, and it's a Virgo too, and like personally for me as an Aries, when I have like my Virgo friend trying to do Virgo things to me, I'm just sitting here like, just let me crash and burn. Just let me do the stupid thing. And then my Virgo friend's like, technically, that's just not right. Like, and I kind of feel that vibe when it came to Katara. And it's so annoying yet so endearing, because like you can tell that Katara really just does the things she does just out of like love. She doesn't do it just because, she wants to purely control you and to make herself feel calmer about a situation. She really just legit cares. And that's why I'm just kind of like, man, you're so annoying, but God, you're such a sweet person. I hate it.
Oh my gosh. And yeah, it's also with like all of that is so true with Virgo Venus. I feel like Virgo Venus just epitomizes acts of service as a love language. That's like, let me help you. And it's like, but I don't always need help. Like I need to make my own mistakes. But I also think that totally comes through with Venus conjoined Saturn in Virgo. Saturn just adds that extra edge of like responsibility and duty, especially ruling the 4th. Like we're also here kind of looking at her relationship to her mother in relationship to her parents, and how with the 4th ruler of the 11th, she really finds more of a sense of family almost through her friends and through her community and through this group she travels with, through these 9th house things that are going on. And she does kind of take on this parental role, and it's in her chart that is a very public thing. But I think that comes through. And I also wanted to mention that you're gonna, for a lot of these charts, for probably obvious reasons, we're gonna see a lot of 9th, 10th, and 11th house focus, because I feel like the 9th, 10th, and 11th are really big themes in this show, like looking at spirituality and religion, looking at, obviously these kids kind of were very well known, and a lot of them took on major leadership roles later in life, as we learned through Korra. And we're operating in a very public, known way. And of course, friendship, power of friendship kind of show, group of young teenage friends who all travel together and save the world, just like the 11th house classically. And yeah, I just wanted to also bring that up.
Yeah. I mean, I think when I see Saturn in the 11th house, I think of Katara. I mean, I both malefics are in her 10th and 11th house. They're both public houses. And literally, I mean, with Mars in the 10th house, it's like fighting to be your designated role in the world. And like when I see Saturn in the 11th house, you can literally see throughout the show how Katara's power and role became more clear and defined going on. And I felt like a lot of her growth kind of really centered on her trying to take on and feeling out different roles. Like she plays the mother role, but then also she defied Paku. And at the same time, she was the painted lady. And then she was trying to be Top's mom. And then she tried to be, not Zuko's enemy, but she was kind of like on breathing down Zuko's neck whenever he first came over. Like, and when I see all of those different relations, oh yeah, and also struggling with the fact that she can bloodbend, like all of those things are all like seen in the context of community. And like literally when Katara is like having all these moments happen, she's literally sitting and thinking, how does this define my role on Team Avatar? And with Venus and Saturn in the 11th house, I feel like it's a really nice, it's nice to have both Venus and Saturn, just because it's kind of, even though like Venus isn't, not in a great condition, like even though, and Saturn's a malefic, having both Venus and Saturn together, it kind of shows literally her journey of trying to find her purpose and I guess, her role or like her place in the show as it goes on. I feel like that was like integral to how she grew.
Yeah.
And also, with the Scorpio ascendant, like she had to be a Scorpio ascendant. She literally talks about her mom how many times? And then she does the thing with her necklace. She's like, this is my necklace. She does that a million times. And then we have a special episode whenever she goes to get revenge, but doesn't really get revenge because she's better than that. So yeah, any more thoughts about Katara before we go to our next person?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, just justifying the Scorpio ascendant, it might come out of nowhere, but I'm sorry, she has to be like a Cancer ruled by Mars. I will not accept any other answer. But yeah, beyond that, you know, she she also holds grudges, which, can totally be Scorpio. She weird to like her own daddy issues and her dad grudge that she had to deal with as she was, on this journey. She really holds on to stuff in a very fixed water way. So
Oh yeah.
wanted to say
Okay.
that. Yeah, let's go on.
Let's see. Dun 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 dun. Oh yes. Oh gosh, Sokka. Okay, so I don't know if it's my like personal way of just trying to be different from everybody else, but like I love Zuko, but as I got to see Sokka from like start to finish, I was like, oh, I love Sokka. Like he is my man. So personally for me, I'm pretty Sokka biased. I mean, I know that he's kind of sexist. He's pretty sexist in the beginning. He's kind of hard to deal with in the very beginning, but like that's his role as comedic relief. I have a very strong bias towards comedic relief characters. So I'm into Sokka and I'm into Bolin. Just so you know, guys. And personally for me with Sokka, I feel like honestly, when he became the brains of the team, that really just cinched in like how much I liked him, just because like for how dorky he is. I was gonna say stupid, but that works too. For how dorky and stupid he is, he's probably one of the smartest people on Team Avatar. But like we don't get to see that often, just because he's such a little prankster. And like hopefully with this chart we kind of captured both aspects. But yeah, I personally love Sokka. I'm kind of sad that Sokka didn't live as long as everybody else in Korra, but that's my take on him.
Yeah, definitely as a kid, I found Sokka annoying, those budding feminist ideas and thinking this guy is sexist and skeptical and kind of negative all the time. I think I've grown to much more appreciate Sokka, and particularly, the way he has this intelligence that's very, very mercurial, as well. You can see. Should we say his placements out loud?
Oh yeah, I forgot to do that. So he's a Gemini ascendant, Sun in Leo, Moon in Capricorn, Mercury in Virgo, Venus in Cancer, Mars in Gemini, Jupiter in Aries, and then Saturn in Leo.
And yeah, so I think, as I thought about Sokka's chart and as we prepared and sort of talked about this, I feel like his problem is kind of having that malefics kind of relatively strongly influencing him, which shows in, he's definitely had trouble with, bad luck and getting into situations like getting trapped in a crack in the ground, getting water dumped on him all the time. He's extremely unlucky. And of course, here we have Mars in the first house. And it's a night chart, so it's not like he's getting unlucky and like destroying himself, but he's often like losing things, getting wet, getting into sticky situations. And of course, has Saturn in the same sign as his sun in detriment, further adding to, just being influenced by malefics and struggling with that. Of course, with the Capricorn moon as well. So he's kind of under the thumb of malefics, but then has this angular exalted Mercury ruling the ascendant, which like really speaks to his particular brand of intelligence and his particular way of working out problems. And yeah, what other thoughts do you have on this chart?
I mean, honestly, what are the odds of having the comedic relief character having a moon in Capricorn? Like, honestly, I am so glad you kind of brought up his suffering first, because that's the part of Sokka that no one really likes to talk about. Because, I mean, to be fair, we just see him going cactus juice and then boomerang and like, his whatever. And like, with his moon in Capricorn, something that I really felt, I guess, I don't know how to say it. Like, there's a part of him that makes me feel very, sad for him, just because, like, he has always tried to live up to what his dad was like. Like, that hit a spot for me. I mean, Sun conjunct Saturn, it doesn't get any more obvious. Like, he literally, and you know what really sucks too? Like, there was an episode where he kind of felt bad because he was like a non-bender and everyone else was a bender. He kind of felt lame, and that's when he found his like space sword. By the way, with Venus and Cancer in the second house, we accounted for the fact that he loves his belongings and anything that he collects, like boomerang, his space sword, etc., etc. But with his moon in Capricorn, he has this constant pressure to be strong. He wants to be like his dad. His Mars is in the first house. He's literally like the epitome of a warrior. And and it's interesting because like he's a Gemini rising. When you look at him, you just look and you're like, you're not really that intimidating. You just have a lot to say, and that's it. But I mean, to be fair, his haiku game is like on point. I mean, Gemini Mars in the first house is pretty on point with that. But like, a lot of what Sokka struggled with in the show was just being like everybody else. Like, he didn't have any bending powers. He kind of hated bending because I got him wet all the time. And like, that's all Katara talked about. So I'm sure that he got annoyed about it at some point. And like, whenever I see him, I just think of him as like the ultimate quote unquote normal guy who wasn't actually normal. He was just in a whole group of prodigies. And he was kind of unfolding that fact that he was also a prodigy, but just in a different way. Like, whenever I was watching the shows again, like him figuring out the mechanism on like breaking the engines, or like looking the mechanism of like an airship, or like all the air balloons, like I'm just sitting here like, how old are you? Like, I don't even know how to assemble a cat tree that I got from Amazon. Like, I barely struggled to do that at the age of 23. And how old are you? So like, I feel like Sokka, as the show progressed, he is still the comedic relief, but like he's more than just the comedic relief, and he became someone that became really meaningful to the Avatar world. So yeah, I mean, that's what I kind of got for Sokka. What do you think?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I did just want to mention, of course, that also with making Venus be in Cancer, he literally fell in love with the moon. So let's just be obvious about that. Venus in Cancer opposing the moon in Capricorn, like, and then the woman he was in love with, she didn't die, but I feel like returning to the moon spirit and leaving your physical body probably fits in the eighth house somehow.
He literally
So,
lost the moon.
literally lost the moon. That's rough, buddy.
He's in the eighth house. Oh man, we're funny.
We
Oh my
funny.
god.
I mean,
Wait,
it's a Gemini chart. It's a Gemini rising chart. We had to be a little cheeky with it. And it works for other reasons. It's just sometimes the symbolism in astrology is painfully obvious, and I think we just need to accept that that is a reality.
You know, speaking of that, I saw a theory on Avatar TikTok that the reason why his space sword randomly came back was because Yue gave it back to him because it's a space sword. And I was like, that is so cute.
And this is the eighth house, and he's getting a gift from the moon
because it's a space sword. So I was like, oh, that's so sweet. But yeah, I mean, I guess the one thing we haven't touched on before we move on, he does have Jupiter in the 11th house. So it's interesting, right? Because like, you know, Aries rules the 11th house, and then Mars is in his first house. When it comes to like the community, I feel like, you know, as he grew up, he became part of like the Republic City Council. I don't know what it was called, but it kind of had that function. He was kind of like the leader in that sense. And I feel like for him, while Sokka is very skeptical of people, I'm going to tie that to like his chart ruler and then to his Mars in the first house. While he kind of sucks at meeting people, he does have a pretty good network. And, you know, obviously with like Jupiter in the 11th house, he had a lot of opportunities to meet people. Even though he kind of tackled it very Martian-like. Like there was that one episode where he tried to put on a bunch of disguises at the Fire Nation because he was so darn paranoid, when literally he could have made so many connections in the Fire Nation, but he never did until he met the swordsman. I forgot his name. I can only literally think of the swordsman saying like, your name should be Lee. It's a good cover name. Good for the Fire Nation, which is funny.
Pandao?
I
Master
think so.
Pandao? That sounds...
Yeah, call Mr. P.
Yeah.
Mr. P or Master P. So like, you know, I think that's all I have for Sokka. What do you think?
Yeah. No, the last thing just to mention is also, yeah, he was part of this Republic City Council, and I believe was also chief of the Southern Water Tribe. Mm-hmm. And of course we have Jupiter ruling the 10th in the 11th house, again, kind of definitely taking on a leadership role, included in a leadership role back home with the sun being in and ruling the 3rd house. That like sort of where he's shown and where he was the king literally was in his local community as well, and really tied. So there's this connection between the 3rd and the 11th house that really speaks to that role. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I got on Sokka.
Okay, from Sokka to Diaka, we are going to Toph. Oh, hell yeah. So Toph, she's a Taurus ascendant, Sun in Aries, Moon in Aquarius, Mercury in Pisces, Venus in Aries, Mars in Capricorn, Jupiter in Leo, and then Saturn in Libra. What is your take on Toph?
Oh, Toph is so interesting. Toph is so hard to pin down because she's very complex despite being, you know, like a 12-year-old. She's a very complex character who like seems to embody both the best of like Saturn and Mars, which you can, you know, see in the chart having both malefics exalted. That she's this person who is simultaneously like a great warrior, kind of impulsive, like martial in being very like there's a jokiness to her, a humor, which I feel like has a lot of Aries qualities, you know, her sun and Venus being in Aries. But yeah, having these really impulsive qualities, but also being very controlled. And that was kind of her whole thing. Like when Aang was encouraged to find her, it was really all about finding someone who can wait and who can listen to stillness and being very like able to wait to act and able to stand strong, and particularly having Mars ruled by Saturn, ruled by an exalted Saturn. It really speaks to kind of her restraint at the same time as her impulsiveness. It's really like an interesting dichotomy, and I you can see, Mars and Saturn in this chart really do a lot.
Oh yeah. I mean, what I find to be so endearing and so human about Toph, like I am so glad that the writers did not make Toph into an amazing parent whenever Korra came around. Spoiler alert, Toph is a crappy parent. And I'm glad that she's a crappy parent because it makes her more human. Granted, I feel sorry for Lin and Suyin, but like Toph, when I think about Toph, I think about crappy family dynamics, and like that brings me comfort because it's like, oh my God, something relatable. Count me in. And, what I found really interesting from that is that Toph, despite her limitations, whether it be from her family, whether it be from, who she was, like she rose up to that. Like she literally found a way to utilize her limits to her benefit. And I feel like that in itself is what makes Toph so, interesting and so impressive. But there's also a side of her that, Toph also has a lot of flaws. And some of those flaws are really fatal. Like I'm just staring at her moon in Aquarius being the lord of her, let me see, her moon being the lord of the third house, and then the lord of her fifth house is in the 11th. I'm staring at that and thinking about the police force and being like, I wonder what could have happened whenever she became a mother. And when you see her in Korra versus an Avatar, she's still pretty consistent. Like Toph is very rough on the edges. It's part of her charm, but it's also a little frustrating sometimes. And yeah, I mean, looking at her chart, she's a Taurus rising, literally the epitome of someone who waits, someone who doesn't dive in. And it's interesting because she has an Aries sun and Venus. Her literal fire was subdued by her parents at first because they were like, no, you can't do anything. You're blind and you're weak and you're a girl. You can't do anything. When she literally was the best bender in her city and no one knew. And it's funny because the lord of her 12th house is Mars in the 9th house. The world knew, but it was still hidden secret. And, with her moon in Aquarius, I think there was a point where Korra tried to hug her after Toph finished teaching her, and Toph is like, no hugs. And then, Korra is like, man, you're worse than Beifong, which is Lin. But she's like, I'm the original Beifong. And I'm like, oh my God. So there's that. And emotions is really interesting with Toph because I think her emotional state is why she clashed with Katara, because Toph is very let me just chill on the side and just stay on the side, pull my own weight, which is what she literally said. Sounds pretty Saturnian in my opinion. And she was really always known to be more on the emotionally detached side. And, that really carried on later on as she grew up. And, it's an endearing yet also a part of her that's a flaw in my opinion. So, I have a lot to say about Toph, but I'm gonna let you say what you gotta say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you made a lot of great points about of course, being a Taurus ascendant with Venus in the 12th, literally having a secret identity for a good part of her childhood. And I think one feature of this chart that's really interesting and that really has interesting implications for her character is, that Jupiter in the 4th being a very literal symbol of her being born into wealth and born into extravagant wealth. And of course, it's also something about the truths of benefics. Just because they bring good things doesn't mean they're necessarily experienced as good. Toph was born into this, extravagant wealth, but that wasn't necessarily a good thing for her. It allowed her parents to have a lot of control over her and to really completely manage her life and give her absolutely no agency. And, of course, hire people to chase her down when she leaves. And of course, the ruler of the 4th is the 12th. Home feels like a prison. Home is a place where she is trapped, and it's a place where she's unable to express herself. And of course, she ends up leaving. The ruler of the 12th is in the 9th. The ruler of the 12th is Mars. She leaves her home because of the way she felt trapped. And I think that all really speaks to a lot of her story, because she is this person who developed this maturity and this detachment after being raised in a family where, you know, she was always under someone else's control. And it seemed like after following those experiences, like she never really wanted to owe anyone anything or be sort of entangled with anyone else like that, where someone else might have control over her, because, you know, one taste of freedom, one taste of like not being in this 12th house space, and it's like, I never want to go back. So there's, you know, the struggle to attach to her own children, there's the struggle to, you know, trust the group and let them in, of course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Eventually, of course, being able to gain those connections to the group, but then eventually going to live on her own again at the end of her life, live in isolation from everyone else. Like, she really, you know, Moon in Aquarius in the 10th, ruling the third in some ways, feels like being known for being a recluse.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was at one point she was like, you know, I was gonna soak my feet in mud for a few weeks, but I guess I'll just teach you. Like she said that to Cora, and I was like, that's some Taurus rising bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. And you know, what's really interesting too is that her Venus is in the 12th house. Her love is so awkward, and it's cute. Like in my opinion, it's cute. Okay, I'm biased because I'm a Venus and Aries. It's cute, but it's really awkward.
Mm-hmm.
So like think about all of the times where Toph has very passively like flirted with like Zuko and Sokka, and
Mm-hmm.
think about the way when like Suki saved her, and she's like, oh my god, Sokka, you saved me, and then Suki's like, it's just me, and it's like awkward. And then I think like, you know, she kind of flirted with Zuko for a little bit. It's funny because she never got with any of them, you know, props to her. And Venus is also the planet of aesthetics. She literally does not know what she looks like. And there was the episode where she and Katara had a bonding moment because Katara pretty much gave her the most Venusian day ever. They had a spa day, and like they got their face did, they had heavy makeup on, and then like a bunch of girls made fun of Toph, and Toph couldn't really judge because she didn't know what she looked like. And like that whole episode was just Toph like accepting inner beauty, and like literally Venus is in her 12th house. And you know, the thing that is so notable about Toph is that, you know, she has a Capricorn Mars. The first thing that we see, or the first thing that's so impressive about Toph, is her combat. Like her Mars is exalted, and the way that she fights, like I would argue she's the best earthbender of all time. I don't care if you like Bolin or Suyin or Lin or anybody else. No, she is the best earthbender. And we can totally put that in because Mars is in Capricorn. She knows the art of earthbending so well to the point where it's mastery. She even uses it for practical means. Like she makes an earth tent, okay? Like that's pretty like earthy to me. And like the way she teaches Aang is super Capricornian too. Like she literally like keeps on like slamming him into the lessons the hard way because that's the only way you get to learn earth. You have to be very stubborn. And she's also very stubborn, like Taurus rising, come on. So yeah, I mean, that's my whole thought on Toph. Actually, one more thing that I wanted to say. It's interesting that her Jupiter is the lord of the 8th house and the 11th house, because literally, you know, the abundance of her family kind of spread out in ways that, you know, resulted in exploitation, control, power dynamics, as we saw with Toph trying to run away. What's interesting though is that, you know, Jupiter is the lord of the 11th house. This is interesting to me because the only reference that I could think of is whenever they were trying to go to Ba Sing Se and like she used her Beifong privilege to get through. And like, you know, Mercury's in the 11th house, and I was just kind of like, huh, that's funny. And then, you know, with her Mercury and Pisces, she's not amazing with words. She's probably better at like whacking you with a rock. And she literally also, I mean, when it came to posters, like, you know, in Ba Sing Se for looking for Appa, she puts the posters upside down. Like, and then communication wise, she doesn't really communicate as well. She's just it's very Pisces like. I say that Pisces Mercury, when it comes to communicating, it's like the texture of mashed potatoes. You just don't know what you're stepping into. It feels very mushy, and it's just like a bunch of confusion. But yeah, anything else on top before we move on?
Yeah, I definitely think another thing, again, I'm gonna keep being corny because I've also been watching She-Ra lately. So another Jupiter ruling the 11th house thing is just like your family is your friends, and that's your real
Oh,
family, chosen family. I'm just gonna be corny about it. I love this show. I love this. I love this little group. I love the gang.
so actually, that's so cute. I didn't think of that. Anyways, Adina's genius. What did I tell y'all? So let's go ahead and go to the next character. Dun dun dun
Yes.
dun. Oh shit, it's Zuko.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
time.
Ooh, okay. So Zuko, he's a Scorpio ascendant, Sun in Scorpio, Moon in Leo, Mercury in Sagittarius, Venus in Scorpio, Mars in Libra, Jupiter in Aries, and then Saturn in Leo. Give me your Zuko hot takes right now.
All right. I mean, let's just start with the fact that Zuko has like one of the best redemption arcs ever written, and is this character who just speaks the idea of like the ability to sort of go against what you were raised with and go against the values that are handed to you and like think them through yourself and stand up to kind of whatever like forces of control around you like are trying to tell you what you're supposed to believe and who you're supposed to be. So I love Zuko. I'm very attached to Zuko. I've always been attached to Zuko.
Yeah.
And I feel so strongly about this character. He's so important, and so much of his struggles, like I just see so much. So I'm definitely biased about making him a Scorpio sun and rising. And also I think we decided he definitely has to be a day chart Scorpio. So like the sun above the ascendant, like Mars is hard for him despite being ruled by Mars. And
Yeah.
he's just he's a really fascinating, complex character, and the show does such a good job with making, I think this would be really highlighted with all of these characters, that each one of them have these dualities within them and are complex and contradict themselves and are, human. And
Mm-hmm.
sorry, I'm just talking. I think one thing that I want to say about Zuko is like we kind of started our Saturn signs based on Zuko,
Yep.
because yeah, we were like, he has like Scorpio rising just feels so obvious, like ruled by just the most Scorpio rising ever. Like he literally is burned on his face, ruled by Mars, and this intense Scorpio type. And you know, we were thinking about Saturn is of course in detriment in Leo, ruling the fourth house, and there are a lot of different manifestations and ways that happens and ways that shows up in his life. Like I was saying, literally goes against, sort of the beliefs of his family, the things handed down to them. Like Saturn, the ruler of the fourth, is in detriment and opposing the fourth house.
Mm-hmm.
And also, speaks to the loss of his mother. Saturn is conjoined the moon in Leo. A big part of his story is, being separated and isolated from his mother. And, in another sense, there's this seriousness of his leadership that comes through as he ages. It's this Saturn in the 10th, and in a day chart that I've always, whenever I see Saturn in the 10th, I think about someone who is known for being very hardworking, very dependable, reliable, and wants to sort of be seen as like competent and seen as very like of use and very good at what they're doing, responsible and fulfilling their duties. And of course, we see him doing that later on in the show. And I'm going to let you talk some because I could just go on about Zuko. So
Okay, you can go on all you want. I mean, we have a lot of time. I mean, honestly, whenever I see Moon and Saturn in the 10th house, and then having Leo being ruled by the Sun in the first house, like whenever I see that, I literally think honor and the power of honor. Because Leo in the 10th house, like literally, when you first see him in the show, he's literally going, "I need my honor." It's a meme at this point, okay? 10th house stuff, and and it really does affect him. Like the sun is in his first and it's the Lord of the 10th. It really has a strong grip on him. And it's like, it has such a strong grip. It's literally a strong integral part of who Zuko is. And, whenever I see like his moon in Leo, he just wants to be seen. And the fact that he struggles to be seen, because I think one requirement that I told Adina whenever we first made Zuko, I was like, whatever Zuko is, his moon needs to be conjunct Saturn. Like his moon needs to be afflicted, like afflicted. So we put, Saturn and moon together. And, with his moon in Leo, he just wanted to be seen. He wanted to be seen for who he was. And I think Ursa saw him for who he was, but Ozai never did. Ozai saw him as everything that he wasn't, everything that he, wanted him to be, but rather than who he was. And, Zuko kind of sucks with like his anger. Like, I don't know if that's obvious, but it's like super obvious. And like his Mars is in the 12th house. And that is chart ruler. He literally does not know his destiny or who he is really until like book 3. It took him a long while, but he finally got there. And, with Libra, it's literally, in book 2, he's like, Azula or Iroh? Azula or Iroh? Like he's literally teetering between the two. And because of that, like he spent a lot of time wondering like, what the heck do I do? And whenever it comes to making a decision, he always goes, what would Iroh say? What would Uncle say? Or he'll talk to a frog whenever he tried to, join Team Avatar. Before he did, the whole, hello, Zuko here. He literally, like he tries to, like, manage his energy by the lens of, like, him imagining other people. He's also pretty good at mimicry, okay? Like, with his moon in Leo, when he talks about, he tries to mimic Iroh with like the silver sandwich, as he's trying to motivate Sokka. It makes no sense, but like he's also good at like emulating other people, even though he kind of sucks at connecting in relationships, because, he does have like, a Venus and Scorpio. He really, really tries. Like I'll give him points for that. Like, Venus is in detriment. You can dislike us, but look, we try really hard. It just comes out the wrong way. Okay? Like at least Zuko had the heart and the love to give May an ice cream on a hot day. Was it our fault that the ice cream fell?
Mm-hmm.
No. But like, the love is there, and like it's really, really sweet. And before I let you talk, Adina, the last thing I want to talk about is Jupiter. I think we highly underestimate how strong and perseverant Zuko is. Like Zuko, like if you play RPGs or like, any video games with a really big boss, like that the final boss takes about like 3 to 4 times to beat. Like there's the first phase and then the second phase and then like a third phase. If it's really painful, and there's a 4th phase, okay? And with Zuko just never dies. Like he never, like you would think that he would die, but he never does. Like in book 1, he's literally dragging Aang in the middle of like, is it the northern tribe? The northern water tribe? He could have died. He could have froze to death. He didn't. And then he went to the Boiling Rock. Like he went everywhere. He went everywhere for honor. And he was really good at surviving despite being born in royalty. Like he could have been like a little royal baby and like not know how to survive. He really did know how to survive, even though he was a bit emo all about it all the way through. But yeah, that's my take.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, absolutely all of that. There's so much. And, a couple of other things I wanted to highlight, including are like, well, first of all, I think there's one important thing to note that he has, it looks like 4 planets in detriment. Like Zuko has a lot of planets that are like struggling, which makes sense for his entire character. And also one thing that I really think is important with planets in detriment is that they tend to overcompensate, especially when they're angular. Like planets in detriment will really overcompensate for the thing they're doing. And of course we see that with Saturn, to like obsession with honor to the detriment of, safety and doing what he wants and following his own dreams, sense of honor and the sense of duty to his father and his homeland through fourth house themes. And also, I think it's really important when we were making this chart to have something going on with the third house ruler and have some affliction, because Azula is Azula. And, the third house ruler, of course, also being Saturn in detriment. And in the 10th house, Azula was favored by his father, while Zuko was favored by his mother. And there's all these like complicated things going on with Moon and Saturn themes and siblings. And this is one people are definitely going to disagree with. I think Mars and Libra is kind of a hot take here. So of course, Zuko is very martial. Like, we know this. He's Jupiter in Aries, Sun, and Venus in Scorpio. But I think one important thing to remember about Zuko is that he really struggles to manage his anger. He struggles with Mars. He struggles with his firebending, and he tries to power it through anger. And then when he doesn't, have that same anger, he loses the ability to firebend there for a minute, and it really gets screwed over in a lot of ways by anger. So this Mars ruling the ascendant in the 12th. Well, first of all, the ascendant ruler in the 12th, the big part of his journey is, being literally banished. So obvious 12th house things. But yeah, there's also this way in which, with Mars and opposing Jupiter and Aries, like, the anger can be a fuel for him, but it's not a sustainable one. And it's not the long-term way he needs to firebending. And he has to learn to, access, solar energy. Like their dance with the dragons when they went to, get judged by the dragons, it was the Sun Warriors. Like, this is about learning to tap into the solar energy that he has right there in his first house. It relies so much on this martial anger instead of, tapping into the heart. And, one other thing, I'm jumping all over the place, but Mercury and Sagittarius, another planet compensating. Like, hello, Zuko here just feels so Mercury and Sagittarius. Like,
Yeah.
My girlfriend has Mercury and Sagittarius also, and she bought like the hello Zuko here face mask that Dante Bosco was selling for a hot minute. It's so funny. It's so awkward. It's so just like I'm trying really hard, and I'm like, I don't know. I can't even explain. I can't put it into words. I feel like if you know, you know.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, I think Zuko gets misunderstood so often. It's kind of insane. Like, he gets misunderstood by that one girl that he went on a date with because he's just so bad at communicating. And then the whole Zuko here thing is a whole other case. And then he also misunderstands people because I think he has so many ideas and assumptions, and his sense of self is kind of difficult in the very beginning. So like, he has a very terrible time with Iroh at first, because Iroh is pretty simple. He just wants the best for Zuko. But Zuko's over here like, no, you just don't want me to have honor, and like all those assumptions, and like it doesn't work out. And I think the Sagittarius also kind of accounts for like his interesting sense of humor, because like Zuko is funny. Like, in those episodes, I think there's a part where, they were talking like jokingly, and Zuko's like, we can do the thing again where like I kind of chase you halfway around the world, and like everyone starts laughing. Or, whenever him and Aang are at the Sun Warrior site and they're about to meet the dragons, he's just kind of like, we could take these dragons, we could take them. Like, you're the Avatar, and I'm like, the Fire Prince. Like, we're gonna be just fine. Like, it's that sort of humor that I think is interesting. And like, Zuko always has the most like interesting phrases. Like, whenever Zuko like yells in anger, or whenever he's like, really vocal, he's also pretty sarcastic too. And it hits hard. Like, it's funny, but it hits hard. So yeah, I mean, that's what I got. Anything else on Zuko, or are you all good?
I mean, I think I'm good. Just, another thing, the ninth house ruler and the 10th, again, people who are known for their journeying, people who are known for their sort of spiritual leadership in a lot of have, those 9th, 10th house themes coming through a lot of these characters, that all of these people were traveling around the world, and that's a big part of their claim to fame and their reputation and what's happening in the story. So just highlighting those themes again. But yeah, that's what I got on Zuko.
Yeah. Okay, so Zuko here means Zuko out. Let's go to our next character. We got we got Azula.
Oh,
okay. Oh shit. Okay, so Azula. We got a Virgo ascendant, Sun in Aries, Moon in Leo, Mercury in Taurus, Venus in Aries, Mars in Scorpio, Jupiter in Gemini, and then Saturn in Virgo. So I'm going to go ahead and say my take on Azula. Like, Azula is terrifying. Like, I kind of forget how young she is. And whenever I first saw Azula, like, whenever I felt her as a villain, like, I was legit terrified of Azula when I was little. Because, I kind of, like, put myself into Team Avatar's shoes and be like, oh my God, there is literally no way to beat this person. She's too scary. I can't do anything. Like, she's, like, perfect. But obviously that goes down at the very end of the show. But, Azula, she's a really good villain. Like, it's hard to find good villains. And my hot take is that even though I think Azula, I haven't read the comics. I don't know if Azula actually got her redemption arc. But in my opinion, if Azula was given a chance at a redemption arc, I don't want her redemption arc to be as good as Zuko's. Just because some villains, the way that they were, some villains, it's not like they don't deserve a redemption arc. It's just that Azula is such a good villain, and that's how I want to remember her. If she had a redemption arc, it just wouldn't feel as prominent or as good as, like, maybe Zuko, for example. And, when you look at her chart, we're going to start off with Saturn in the first house. She really, kind of hides the Saturn and doesn't hide the Saturn at the same time. She hides the fact that she hates herself, but she definitely doesn't hide the fact that she is an authority. Like, she literally manipulated all of the Dai Li as a child. And, she also has the same moon sign as Zuko, but her moon is not in the 10th house like Zuko's. It's in the 12th house. She also wants to be seen. Both Zuko and Azula wanted to be seen, but they were both seen and not seen for different reasons. But Azula, she kind of got the rougher end of the stick with emotions just because, she misunderstood her mother, and she has mommy issues, so, relatable on that one. And, she wants to be seen too, but the way she goes about it being seen is a lot more destructive, because her sun is in the 8th house. So Leo rules her 12th house. The sun is in the 8th house. She's like, oh, I can be seen if I exploit. So let me go take over the Earth Nation. Let me go ahead and destroy Ba Sing Se and see if that'll please my father. And, the 8th house is also the house of inheritances. While we're at it, she's like, ooh, let me get noticed. And after I exploit everything, maybe I'll become the Fire Lord and exploit that from Zuko. So, that's my starting take on Azula, but I'll let you go.
Yes. Well, Azula is, of course, like, our classic unhinged woman character, and I'm always partial to unhinged women, like, in any sense of the word. In any case, I think she's fantastic, and I agree. There's something about, maybe she does get a redemption arc, I'm not sure. And I do think she, like, deserves redemption because she's been indoctrinated into absolute madness. And there is just this power in her as a villain. Like, it's really the kind of villain who, like, knows their own power in a way that's kind of terrifying, especially for someone young. Like, she reminds me a little bit of Katara in She-Ra. Like I said, I've been watching She-Ra, and I don't know if you watched it, but if anyone listening is familiar with Katara, like, Katara is very, like, acutely aware of her trauma, and at this point just, like, doesn't care. It's like, the world has fucked me, so I am going to fuck the world, and I don't care about, like, the morality of it. I don't care about what's right and wrong. I care about power, and I care about, sort of avenging my emotions. Azula has some of that going on as well, but it's like, it's not about, like, what's right or wrong. It's not any sense of, like truly believing in, like, the mission of the Fire Nation. It seems to really just be about like following these whims and following these like ideas and passions. And of course, her chart ruler is opposing Mars and Scorpio, which is a very strong Mars ruling the Sun and ruling Venus. But this is, of course, a Mars in the third house, which, again, throughout the Fire Nation, we have a lot of third house problems. We have a lot of sibling problems.
Yeah.
And of course, being very literally, the third house is Scorpio, just like Zuko's sun and ascendant. And she has a lot of strength with her sibling, but her sibling also has a lot of strength. They have a very contentious warlike relationship and end up on opposite sides of issues a lot, and it's really impacted. There's of course her chart ruler and ruler of the third house are opposing. Like there is a rivalry here. And I also think it's interesting that her fourth house ruler, like Zuko's, is in detriment in the 10th house. And there's something very public, about their family. Like they're literally royalty. And both, of course, that are in detriment. And so there's these complex experiences with family, with parenthood. Both had a kind of difficult relationship with at least one parent. And both, arguably with both parents, for different reasons. There was a lot of pressure placed on Azula. And of course, in this chart, the fourth ruler is Jupiter, versus in Zuko's chart it was Saturn, which Azula was ultimately favored by her father, was given a lot more, was given accolades by her father, but it still didn't, amount to the things she wanted from him. Like this is still chart ruler in detriment, and there's a lot of work that has to be done. Do you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think I also need to emphasize, like, with her Scorpio Mars, like, her fire is blue. Like, her fire is really hot, like, extra hot, like, spicy. And one thing that's really prevalent about Azula is that she has always been better than Zuko originally with firebending, and that was, like, the first key point about her. And Azula is also very manipulative, but she's also very awkward in relationships. And that's the perfect way to characterize Venus and Aries in the 8th house. It's like you're awkward in your love languages, but hey, you know how to manipulate people for your own bidding. Like she literally, pretty much coerced, May and Ty Lee to join her, and then gets really distraught whenever they betray her. And then, whenever she, goes to, is it Ember Island? And she goes to the party with all the Fire Nation teenagers. She is so awkward on flirting that like it hurt, like the way that she laughed. Like once she got advice from Ty Lee, and when you see Ty Lee's chart, it's gonna make a lot of sense. Like, oh my God, God bless our Venus and Aries people in here, especially me. And for her, like she was so awkward yet so powerful in her relationships, just because she knew how to get control. But anything beyond that, it was just kind of like, oh, I laugh way too loud whenever I hear a joke, and it's supposed to be flirty, but it comes off really overbearing. And whenever Ty Lee and May finally betrayed her, Cancer rules her 11th house. She was not the same. Like she was never the same. And with Saturn in her first house, I think one thing, as we were discussing, how to make the charts, there is a moment where, whenever she's about to be inaugurated as the Fire Lord, she was so darn paranoid. It was like peak Virgo energy at its worst, because I think she was eating like a fruit, and like there was like a little bit like a seed, and she like freaked out and was like, oh my God, you're trying to kill me. And then she fires everybody. And then one part that was so pivotal was when she tried to cut her hair. And she grabbed her hair and she was like, hair, it's time to meet your doom. And she goes, pachoom. And like, she did the most practical way of cutting her hair, but it wasn't the prettiest. I mean, it was a practical haircut, but it wasn't pretty. And she was so distraught at that point. And like, I really felt like that was her Saturn in the first house finally and truly weighing on her, because she wasn't sharing that weight with Ty Lee and tightly in May. And also the moon is in the 12th house. Like, honestly, if we wanted a redemption arc from Azula, we would have to get it from Ty Lee in May. They would have to be the catalyst to her redemption arc, but if she gets one. But yeah, that's what I have for Azula.
Yeah. I think that those are all really great points. And I think particularly with, you know, the Aries placements, like this is an exalted sun and a detriment Venus. Like this is someone with a lot of confidence and power in these eighth house ways. But then, of course, when it comes to the more subtle aspects of that, rather than just like having power, that's where she completely falls apart. Like she can be very assuming and very big and very confident, but she can't necessarily do the finesse things. She can't do the subtleties that are necessarily required. Like also, you know, Mercury and Taurus is then ruled by Venus and Aries. Like the subtleties are not necessarily there because she doesn't have great access to those ways of relating to people. And, you know, she cuts off these relationships. Like when she's firing everyone, she's very much, if someone betrays her, she's very willing to just completely ignore them, completely like write them off. She doesn't, you know, stick necessarily to these relationships, and enforces a sense of kind of being alone, like, and it's lonely at the top kind of vibe, which I think also speaks to Saturn in the first. Like there's a loneliness to her that she doesn't necessarily express because she's an Aries sun Leo moon still. Like that's still a very fiery person who can portray that confidence, but that doesn't mean she doesn't feel the loneliness, feel the isolation. Like clearly never really had like friends growing up, which we can see from the way she interacts with other people her age at Ember Island. And, you know, her friends are kind of under her control. There's not really a sense of sociability.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, speaking of her Mercury, I feel like it's really hard to deceive Azula. I mean, she's already doing all the deceiving, but it's hard to deceive her because, I mean, a lot of people kind of mischaracterize Taurus Mercury as being slow learners and they don't learn well because they're slow because it's Taurus. Okay, like, you know, first of all, shut up. Second of all, you know, Taurus, one thing about Taurus that is, or Taurus Mercury that I find really, really powerful is that you will never see a Taurus Mercury contradict themselves. They will grip onto their words to the end of time, for better and for worse. And when it's for better, you can count on a Taurus to never, ever, you know, be a hypocrite. And I think what's funny about Azula, I mean, I don't think there are a lot of periods where Azula has been hypocritical. She's like deceiving, yet not very hypocritical at all. Like you can tell, like she's like truly, legitimately not a bad person, but like she's like very like transparent in how deceiving she became. Like it's like right there. She wasn't very like she's slick, but it wasn't like inconsistent slicking. It was consistent, powerful, slick behavior. And you know, with our Mercury and Taurus, also in the ninth house, I think to me, Taurus in the ninth house kind of sounds like, you know, you might have grown up in an environment where it's like you have to be very, very persistent and consistent with your beliefs. And whenever I think of Fire Nation and Indoctrination, I'm like, oh, you know, that's one way to look at it. It's right there. And Azula is also very stubborn. Like, I think Katara and a lot of characters tried to change her mind, tried to get her on the right side, try to get her to do something else. She's super stubborn. She never changed her way. And I think that really shows in Mercury in the ninth house. And I think Mercury in the ninth house also shows worldly communicative powers. That might be a placement that kind of shows how she got the Dai Li under her fingers. So yeah, honestly, that's what I got for Azula. Do you have anything else or are you all good?
Yeah. I think, the one last thing I had to say about Mercury and Taurus is she's the one person who Toph can't tell if she's lying. Like she's able to stay completely like still and calm while telling outrageous lies, which again speaks to a sort of constancy and rootedness of Taurus.
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. And you know, and Toph is impressive. Like if you can beat Toph, like then oof. And you know, also you kind of said Saturn and the first people are like lonely on the top kind of people. Whenever you said that, I actually have a lot of friends who have Saturn in the first house. And I'm just like, yeah,
Mhm.
all of my Saturn, the first people friends, they're all super, super competent, but they're kind of super lonely. And I just sat there, I was like, huh, interesting. And, just a passing thought. But yeah, is there anything else or are you all good?
Yeah. I think I'm all good. Oh yeah, by the way, would it be okay if I took a short bathroom break? I am so sorry.
Oh, yeah, go
Okay.
ahead. Take a piss.
Okay.
We're going to have an intermission. So, welcome back. Intermission over. Let's go ahead and get into the next sign. Boop. Okay. Ooh, May. I remembered this chart not being the easiest to make.
Mhm.
So, she's a Capricorn ascendant, Sun in Scorpio, Moon in Aquarius, Mercury in Scorpio, Venus in Libra, Mars in Aries, Jupiter in Gemini, and then Saturn in Virgo. So I'll go ahead and try to start this one off. So she's a Capricorn rising. I mean, literally, I date a Capricorn rising. They are like flat face, not like flat face. That's not the word for it. It just looks so composed, stoic. Also, you don't see May wearing bright colors. Capricorn risings, their color range is very limited and it's like iconic and kind of hot. I have a bias towards Capricorn risings, okay? And, we know May most as a friend of Azula's, naturally put her sun in Scorpio in the 11th house and her Mercury in the 11th house. I mean, she's pretty dry with the things that she says. It's iconic. And it's funny because when I think of the sun in astrology, I think of the sun as like the part of ourselves that we focus on because technically we are our whole chart, but the sun is kind of like, oh, let me put a flashlight on what we can most fixate on. We naturally fixate May as Azula's friend, literally so with Sun in the 11th house. And, but Mars in Aries because she had a really tough time with her family and she got her weapon skills from literally just throwing knives in her room out of boredom. Like that's like the most Mars the fourth thing that I've probably ever heard. And it's an Aries. So she's pretty good at her knife throwing. And, with her moon in Aquarius, she's very, I mean, think of the way that Toph feels and then think how May feels. They kind of function on the same emotional wavelength. They're kind of dry, kind of detached, and they don't want to meddle or have someone meddle into their emotions too much because they're Saturnian. And when you're Saturnian, it's your business only. So yeah, that's my little quick about May. What do you think about her?
Yeah, May, now we're gonna get into a little of my feelings. I feel very strongly about Zutara, and I say that with the caveat that I don't necessarily feel like they should have just gotten together in the end and always have things be perfect because I don't necessarily believe that. But I do think that Zuko and Katara have a lot more chemistry and a lot more dynamism than both Katara and Aang and Zuko and May. Because I think there's a danger with Zuko and May that we see in this chart. Like these are two Scorpios, and I think one of the things that we see happen, their moons oppose each other. So there's a lot of like good things and the reason why they're together, and I think they make a good couple. But I think both Zuko and May have these strong Scorpio and strong Saturn placements, and I think there can be a tendency to like get stuck a little bit in the Saturnness and the maleficness in some negative emotions. And I think both of them, when contrasted with other people who bring out a different side of them, like we see May and Ty Lee as a duo, where May is kind of like the goth girlfriend and Ty Lee is like the pastel girlfriend. Like maybe May and Ty Lee should just be girlfriends. I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't be mad about it, but they can kind of like that can bring something out of May that neither May or Zuko can do for each other. So that's my little rant because all of the things you were saying are true. Like May is a Scorpio who's very Saturnian. Like everything is kept under wraps. Like that is on lock. Like that she is not going to show her emotions, not going to show her cards. Like, but also we have Mars in the fourth house. Like she has these knives, these very small knives. Like she doesn't brandish a big weapon. It's like a hidden weapon. That's something that's very sharp, very precise. Like we see Mars in Aries versus Zuko's Mars in Libra. Like May is very controlled about the way she fights, and her fighting style is very precise, it's very specific, and that's like a strong Mars, because you know when Mars is strong, Mars can do Mars things well. And you know, with this fourth house, it's not a very like loud Mars. It's a much more quiet, like internal Mars that's very important to her foundationally. And yeah, you know, I think those are some of my thoughts on May. I feel like, do you kind of remember like what our thinking was around Venus and Libra? Because I know it makes sense.
I think it's the fact that May likes equality.
Mm.
She kind of I think she really strongly hates the idea of roles. Like, she is a very strong person that strives for equality. She doesn't do this just to Zuko. She does it most strongly to Azula, where she's like, I love Zuko more than I fear you. Because she thinks of love in partnership and equality rather than a solitary thing like Azula would with the Venus and Aries. Now, to point to your hot take about the shipping, while Katara is not my favorite ship, I can see why people love Katara so much, because there is a spice factor to Katara and Zuko. It's because they're both Scorpio risings, in my opinion. They both have that Scorpio spice of holding things on. Mai is too, or not Mai, it's spelled like Mai, but it's May. May is too collected to like give Zuko that, you know, bubbling, you know, explosion of growing up. I think May can help May can help Zuko grow, but not in the way that Katara would. Like, I think like May is kind of like Iroh, because I think we're gonna look at Iroh's chart later, but like I don't want to expose his placement yet, but like there is a commonality in May and Iroh, and both of them have taught Zuko or tried to teach Zuko how to be calm and collected. But, you know, of course, Zuko fails. But like they both tried to keep him collected and try to keep him more, you know, Capricornian. But like obviously it didn't work out. So for May, I think the reason why I put Venus in Libra is because, you know, I think that would put Zuko's Mars conjunct to hers by sign, and you know chemistry. But May, as you know, solitary as she seems, she does value partnership. She does value equality and tries to carry that out, because you know a lot of people think of Libra as like the walking over sign, the sign that's like you know the one that always get walked over, the passive sign. But Libra is about equality. It goes both ways. And for her, she's willing to do her part in a relationship, but she's also the type to equally call out when you haven't done enough, as you can see with what she does to Azula. And then I think one thing that we didn't talk about is her Jupiter in the 6th house. I mean, May is pretty resourceful. I think one of the rationale that we had was that whenever, you know, Aang was trying to lead them away by using like pieces of Appa's fur when they were traveling, May was smart enough to be like, this is fishy. And like, May just also seems very street smart. And I think street smartness with Gemini in the 6th house, I think that pretty fits. But yeah.
I think you really said it all. I think that pretty well captures May. These later characters, some of them are harder just because like we don't see as much of them, so we don't get as many like stories about their family. Oh yeah, one other thing, just you know, Mars being in the 4th house, like she comes from this, you know, prominent Fire Nation family that became the sort of rulers of Omashu during the Fire Nation occupation, and of course feels very stifled by her family. Like this day chart Mars, like it's kind of an uncomfortable experience that she, you know, wants to leave. Like, and she does end up eventually, you know, leaving her family when Azula calls. Like with Ty Lee, it kind of took some convincing. With May, it didn't take much. She was like, "Great, get me out of here. Like, I'm good. Let's go." Like, when? What time? When do we leave? Like, yeah, that's that Mars in the 4th and then ruling the 11th house. It's like, yeah, I'm out of here. Like, we're good.
Yeah, and ironically, she goes into the world because it's better than her house, but she also hates the world. Like, I think
Yeah.
there's a point where like she was cuddling with Zuko and like they were both hating the world together, and I was
Mhm.
like, this is disgusting, but it's so cute. And that's a pretty good way to kind of characterize Saturn in the ninth house.
Yeah.
She's pretty emo about the world. She doesn't have a very optimistic view, and I can't blame her. So yeah, I mean, partly because Mercury is the lord of the 11th house, and I wonder what made the world such a really poopy place. I mean, I don't
Mm.
know. It's almost like Azula doesn't exist. But
Yeah.
you know, I digress. Is there
Mm.
anything else you want to talk about with May, or do you want to move on?
I think let's move on because I'm pretty sure I know who's next, and it's gonna be a fun one.
Yes, it's me, Ty Lee.
Woo.
So for context, every time like there's like a little like meme on Twitter where you get to put yourself with your favorite fictional character, I always put myself with Ty Lee. I'm literally Ty Lee. Like I don't know how I come off online, but if I sound serious and academic, I am 0% like that in real life. And just think of Ty Lee when you look at me in person. So Ty Lee is a Libra ascendant, Sun in Virgo, Moon in Leo, Mercury in Libra, Venus in Libra, Mars in Gemini, Jupiter in Gemini, and Saturn in Virgo. So Adina, I will let you take it away. What are your thoughts on Ty Lee?
Yes, of course. Well, Tylee obviously has to be some kind of Venusian. I mean, is the contrast to Azula's Aries flirting by saying we're going to take over the world together. Tylee is like such a flirt. She is basically constantly flirting with anyone who speaks to her at any moment. She's like Venus and Mercury and Libra, like, hello. She is constantly on, constantly charming, so like so naturally socially gifted and really kind of fills that role that May and Azula both are severely lacking in. They're not the most social, but Tylee is so buoyant, and I think the Sun in Virgo might be interesting to some people because I remember I hopefully will reflect and remember kind of some of the things you said about this, but a big part of her story is having these seven sisters who look exactly like her, and she really doesn't have an opportunity to have an identity and have her own identity and be herself until she literally again runs away. 12th house, the 12th house keeps coming up here too because so many of these characters like run away and isolate themselves from things in their past, their families, their experiences, each other. Like there is this way that Tylee struggles to develop an identity, and she's really good at like projecting an image. She still has Mercury in the first house ruling the sun, but the sun and Saturn in the 12th, like there's a real pressure on her to be something she's not, and there's this experience of isolation, this experience of having all these people exactly like her. And of course Jupiter and Gemini, I think, is an almost literal thing in terms of a bunch of siblings, just like an abundance of siblings, an abundance of twins. And Jupiter, of course, ruling the third house of siblings in Gemini, the sign of twins. And, when we think about, again, benefics not always being a good thing, multiply a bunch of siblings and you get, people, someone who doesn't feel like they can have their own voice heard.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I'm gonna make my hot take on Ty Lee. Personally, as a girl who's very bubbly and kind of I personally get labeled as like the dumb, the dumb, bubbly, spaced out girl. Ty Lee gets the same label. You can look at Ty Lee's chart and know why it's a really bad idea to just singularly label Ty Lee as a dumb girl who's only good for her looks and her sense of humor. Because she has Saturn conjunct to her sun in Virgo in the 12th house, and it's Virgo out of all signs. Like, how does it take someone to realize that she and her sisters all look the same? Like, what kind of what kind of observation skills do you need to realize that? And then two, I think with, her Virgo sun, she is very exactitude. I think she's a lot more contemplative than people may realize. Because, like, you know, when you do chi blocking, you have to be very exact. You can't just, like, you know, act impulsively and, like, touch wherever you want. You have to know the exact spot. And I think that really says a lot about Ty Lee as a character, because everything about Ty Lee, everything about a girl who is bubbly and very, you know, seemingly dumb, it's all manufactured. It's all made up. We do it on purpose because it gets you off guard. And that's where Venus gets really scary. And that's why people hate Libras, by the way, because Libras, we make ourselves look stupid so that you guys don't take advantage of us, or you just think like, oh yeah, they're super dumb. They can never do anything intelligent. And then we surprise you, and then that's when we win. So, you know, I really want to paint Ty Lee as a person who's also very strong, even though she gets portrayed as, like, you know, the dumb girl in the series. And what I find really ironic is that her, Zuko, and Azula have their moon in Leo, but then May's the one with the moon in Aquarius. Ty Lee, like Zuko and Azula, they just want to be seen. She really wanted to be seen. And technically she is, because her moon's in the 11th house. And, you know, with her Venus in the first house and Mercury in the first house, she gets all of the cute dudes. Well, I don't know if they're cute. She gets all the guys coming up. And, you know, she's good at flirting. She does get seen. But the problem with Zuko and Azula is that they don't get seen in the way they want to. Well, actually with Zuko, he doesn't get seen, period. And then Azula doesn't get seen in a way that's healthy. For her, Ty Lee gets all the attention she can have. But what's so sad about Ty Lee is that she can have all the attention everywhere, but she won't like any of it because it's not tied to her as a person. It's tied to the manufactured self that is designed to get attention. So whenever she receives attention, I am 100% sure that she's like, yeah, I get all this attention, but for what for? It's not really me. It's the me that you guys pressured me to create. And part of that self was what she made from the circus. Whenever she trained the circus, she manufactured that circus self. She manufactured herself to be, you know, charismatic. So, you know, that's my hot take on Ty Lee.
Yeah.
And, you know, with her Mars and Gemini in the 9th house, I kind of see that as her career in the circus. But then I also kind of see that as the way that she fights and the way that she gets angry. Whenever she gets angry, she pretty much word vomits. Like, it's a Gemini Mars thing. Like, she just literally just goes, you have no heckin' idea on what it's like to be not noticed for who you are. So, you know, when it comes to, and also her Mars, I don't know if it's conjunct by Jupiter. By sign it is. I would say that she's a pretty skilled fighter, but the way that people approach her, they actually don't know how dangerous she is until she actually does the whole little blocking thing. And I think with Gemini Mars, I think having knowledge of chi blocking is necessary. And it's very Mercury, because it's very exact. So I think the Mercury ruled Mars is a pretty good fit. But yeah, do you have anything else about Ty Lee before we move on?
Yeah, I think that was a great character analysis. And, you know, just thinking about that moon in Leo as well, I had something to say about that. I totally forgot, but I'll make a different point about, you know, Mars, Jupiter, and Gemini. Again, you know, it's so true. This fighting style, that this is, you know, chi blocking is very mercurial, and this is kind of the way she fights. And it's also, of course, Mercury in Libra. So again, underestimated. It seems very personable, very unbeatable, and you don't see underneath this like Marsy fighting side. And you know, it's worth paying attention to how Jupiter is the ruler of the 6th house, and chi blocking is very like, it requires a lot of knowledge of the body too, and really understanding how the body works and how different things flow in the body. So you've got this Mars Jupiter conjunction of, like, again, in a way similar to Katara, like this connection between the body and in fighting. And Katara, of course, uses that to heal, and Ty Lee uses that to incapacitate. But both have this knowledge about the body that is really important to their fighting. And yeah, one other thing that I wanted to highlight is, you know, so Ty Lee versus May in their 11th houses. Ty Lee's 11th house is Leo, and May's is in Scorpio. And when I was thinking about these, I thought about how both of them experience Azula as a friend, and Ty Lee kind of experiences a very like an Azula who's very much a leader, like the Azula called louder idea, and that Azula is something to follow. And May, her falling out with Azula is very like martial. It's very sorry. Like May and Zula is, the I love Zuko more than I fear you kind of thing. There's this adversarial relationship they have that doesn't necessarily exist with Ty Lee, at least in the same way. And I swear I had a brilliant point about the moon and Leo that's totally slipped my mind. So
Yeah, I mean, we can go back to it, like, if you ever, like, remember it. I mean, with the whole thing about, Ty Lee's falling out with Azula being less, like, overwhelming, I will admit that Libra risings are more likely to be followers. Going back to Aang, it might be the reason why Aang didn't feel much like a leader, in my opinion. He didn't feel like much like a leader. He kind of felt like a guy that consulted his friends. And Ty Lee doesn't have that leadership power that Azula did. And while May wasn't the leader, May kind of seemed like a person that you had to respect, regardless of who was a leader or not. So, yeah. I mean, honestly, I'm pretty good with Ty Lee. You want to move on?
yeah. Oh yeah, I did just remember, what you were talking about with the moon and Leo being seen, that of course the moon and Leo is ruled by the sun, both in the 12th house and in aversion to the moon and Leo. So it's like what people are seeing is not who she actually is, because those two planets can't connect. And so I think that was my point.
Wow. Yeah. Ooh, brilliant. So yeah, let's go ahead and get to the next person. We got da 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 da. Iroh. Oh my god. Okay, so Iroh is a Cancer ascendant. His sun is in Libra, Moon is in Pisces, Mercury's in Virgo, Venus is in Scorpio, Mars is in Capricorn, and then we got Jupiter in Cancer, and then Saturn in Aquarius. Now, he is a powerhouse. What are your thoughts on Iroh?
Yeah, Iroh is such an interesting character, because where we meet Iroh, he's kind of the lovable but a little goofy uncle who's training Zuko in firebending, and he loves to drink tea and play games and be just a very chill old man. But we have to remember Iroh is one of the few characters in the show where we meet him later in his life, and we have all the context from before. Like a lot of these people were meeting as kids and then kind of getting little details of their later life. But Iroh, we really kind of know a lot of his story, and we know about the fact that he's now this very spiritual person who then we see Korra living in the spirit world and sort of enjoying being in this spiritual place. But he was a war general. He, nearly conquered Ba Sing Se in his younger years. And I felt really strongly about having him be some kind of water sign as his ascendant, because I was thinking about triplicity lords here, and one use of triplicity lords being the idea of different planets being active during your early years, middle years, and later years. And one of the key things with a water sign ruling the ascendant is that the first triplicity, or Mars is one of the triplicity lords. And so for a night chart, you have Mars being the first triplicity lord. So there's this way in which Iroh is a war general. He goes to war, and these early years are marked by war. And then Venus, being the second triplicity lord, is still in Mars sign. So again, we still have these martial ideas that carry through. And then he doesn't really reach that spiritual point until the later part of his life, with the moon as the third triplicity lord. That at the end of his life, he comes into this very spiritual ninth house Pisces moon place. But yeah, that takes a while, and he struggles with those things. And so Iroh's really interesting character that we have to hold the truth of like his past and his present, and is kind of someone we've met like near kind of the end of his redemption arc, in a sense, because he's still very much with the Fire Nation, but he rejects that and has kind of weaseled his way out in various ways. So yeah, I'm curious what other thoughts you have, to start us off.
Yeah, so before we forget, so Ira was known as the Dragon of the West. We put his Mars in the 7th house for a reason, and Mars is the Lord of the 10th house, and he's known as the Dragon of the West, which is reputation, which is a 10th house thing. So yeah, you're welcome. So, and also, his Mars is in Capricorn. Like, we look at Zuko's Mars in Libra, and then his Mars in Capricorn. It's the perfect demonstration on why Mars is in detriment in Libra, but it's exalted in Capricorn. Perfect demonstration. And to me, when I think of Iroh, he shows, he really teaches us a good lesson that happiness is a very complicated subject. Like, there's a bit of tragedy that's tied to Iroh that makes him so likable, but so painful sometimes as a character, just because he shows that your relationship with happiness will definitely change over time. Like, the reason why happiness is something that you create in within yourself is because you are changing as a person. What once made you happy 10 years ago will not make you happy now. And for Iroh, that was definitely the biggest thing. And his Venus is in Scorpio in the 5th house. We kind of had to account for the fact that, like, he lost Lieutenant. And once he lost Lieutenant, his views on happiness changed forever. And we can see the way that he tries to nurture Zuko. Note that his Venus would fall into Zuko's 1st house. And Iroh shows the most beautiful way that Scorpio Venus can manifest, because one thing that I like to tell my Scorpio Venus clients is that they're not just creepy people who stalk their crushes on Facebook, but they're also people that are truly the people who mean it when they say that they'll be there for you through thick and thin. Iroh has proven to Zuko that he was there for him through thick and thin, even when Zuko didn't know. And honestly, being there for someone through thick and thin and actually following it is super Scorpio Venus. And, for the record, I'm pretty pessimistic. When people say that they'll be there for you through thick and thin, usually they like to think they're there for people through thick and thin, but in reality, it's not the case. And Iroh really makes that point. And, with his sun in Libra in the 4th house, he was always somebody who, was about balance. He was more of the peaceful brother, the brother that kind of got tossed around, with his Saturn in the 8th house, like, his literal potential to be the Fire Lord got taken away. Like, his inheritance literally got stolen. And I will say, though, with his moon in Pisces, like, something about Iroh just seems so empowering, just because, like, as much as he's been marked by the world, he's not as tied down to the world as he could have been. And I feel like that's really, really empowering, especially for people who feel like they don't have the hope to, be free from, the trauma and the struggles they went through. But Iroh kind of teaches you that you can be like him. He went through a lot. He used to be a bad person. He used to exploit. He used to, people forget that, like, Iroh might have killed people as a war general. He probably did. And, like, but look at him now. Like, he did, like, a whole 180. And, it kind of shows that, like, I mean, kind of, like, honestly, whenever I think of Iroh, I just kind of think, this is basically Zuko in, like, several decades. And when you see Zuko later on, super chill. Like, Zuko is super chill, but I think there's a part where Bolin like freaks him out a bit, and Zuko's just kind of like, what the heck? So you still have, like, that spiciness, but yeah, Iroh is such a inspiring character.
Yeah. That I really do. He is, and I think he's so interesting, and again, another really wonderful, complex character. Like, just thinking about this Saturn Aquarius in the 8th with his inheritance. Like, this is a night chart Saturn. Like, this is not a friendly, like, helpful Saturn. Like, this is a Saturn that just is destructive. And of course, we've got the fallen sun in the fourth house. Like, he literally fell from solar things. He fell from being a general, a leader, and, allegedly failed, after the death of his son, ruled by this detriment Venus, like, losing his birthright, losing his title, and then, Mercury ruling Virgo. I think one indication of a strong third house is like a strong sibling. Like, the sibling is the person who gets the strength. And we see some of that, and also the kind of trickery of Mercury. Like, everything that happened with Ozai and taking the title was very devious. It was all very like calculated and played in a very like smart way, in a very mercurial way. And so there's this Mercury experience. And of course we also have Jupiter in Cancer, and Jupiter, tends towards excess. Like, whatever he does, he kind of does it the best and does it the most. And, we see that both in like his fighting and in the war and in the siege, and as a general, that takes on this really prominent role, and then turns sharply towards the spiritual. Jupiter rules the night and rules the moon, and is in the first, in mutual reception with the moon. Like, it's always kind of written into his chart to have the spirituality, but first he has to overcome these fourth house issues, these like father issues, basically get over his daddy issues and his Fire Nation issues to experience spirituality and experience what makes him feel centered and rooted. Because even before he really went off and joined Zuko and did all of that, he had also visited the Sun Warriors and accessed this spiritual side of firebending. Everyone said that he killed the dragons, Dragon of the West, because he killed the last dragons, but really he was deemed worthy by the dragons. That this wasn't him conquering the dragons with Mars exalted and Jupiter exalted. Like, there was a healthy and like positive exchange of power and spirituality, and he protected them. So I'm kind of rambling about that, but I think that is a really interesting feature of his story.
Yeah. And a few things before I finish my take on Iroh, I kind of noticed that his moon opposes his Mercury. And it's really funny because you can interpret that as his advice being very cryptic, even though it's supposed to be very specific and efficient to helping an issue. And, Iroh always has the best things to say. Like, when it comes to like finding Avatar quotes, Iroh's probably the one on the list with the best quotes, like hands down. And on top of that, I also noticed that his Venus is squared, actually not squared. So his Venus is squared to Saturn, but then his Venus is trine to Jupiter. So it's interesting because like when you think about his relationship to, being doing exploitation and being exploited, it really killed his ability to make healthy relationships. And when he started being himself and started to expand on himself, that's when he really started to be, the best that he could have been. And also, since a lot of the fire folk here tend to have a moon in Leo, Leo rules his second house. He's kind of seen as the guy who kind of like just grounds everybody and just be like, look, calm down. No big deal. And, I think the other thing that I would put is that his moon is also trine to Jupiter. He eventually learned to have a very healthy relationship with emotions and to like let things out. He's very zen, he really likes tea. And, what better way to have an advisor to Zuko than somebody who has a nice Jupiter moon trine? So yeah, that's what I kind of got for Iroh. Do you have anything else for our favorite guy?
I think that really captures it. One other interesting thing I just thought about is, clearly he's had some relationship with someone because he has a kid, but like he never talks about his wife. We know nothing about his wife. We know nothing about if he was ever married, if who Luten's mother is, and not only is Mars in the seventh the ruler, the seventh is in the eighth. Like this part of his life is hidden. Like we don't know. We just don't know. And there's malefic influence. We might imagine that something happened, but we don't know that from the show. So it's interesting that it's something that's kept secret.
Oh yeah, interesting. I always thought about that. I was like, where is mom? Where does mom go? Like Lieutenant had a mom, right? So
we assume.
yeah. So yeah, let's see who is next. Dun 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 dun. Suki. Ooh, okay. Oh my god, I love Suki. Suki.
Yes.
God, I love everything about Suki. Like I love her hair, I love her eyes, like I love her outfits, everything. So Suki, she is an Aries ascendant. She's a sun Aquarius, moon in Gemini, Mercury in Capricorn, Venus in Aries, Mars in Capricorn, and then Jupiter in Aries, and then Saturn in Leo. So from my take on Suki, holy smokes, okay? Like she is an Aries rising. She is in charge of the Kyoshi warriors. Venus in the first house, she's hot. Like, I'm just gonna put that out there. She has an aesthetic warrior appearance. Like the makeup is everything. It's on point. And, she's all about community. She has Aquarius ruling the 11th house, and she royally kicks Sokka's butt in the very beginning with that beautiful Capricorn Mars in the 10th house. And, okay. I mean, that's my initial intro to Suki. What do you think about Suki?
Yeah, Suki's fantastic. This contrast to Sokka falling in love with Yue, which was of course very, very wholesome, but probably in the long term, Suki actually challenges him and kind of doesn't put up with his bullshit. And I mean, we love Yue, we love a Cancer, we love the moon, but I think Yue really would have allowed Sokka to get away with a lot more. Suki does not. Suki doesn't have time for his bullshit, and that's something we got to appreciate. It's really, I love seeing, her sun and moon in the 11th and 3rd house in air signs, also born under a waxing moon. This is someone who does a lot with her community and with both of, these are the people she grew up with. She grew up on Kyoshi Island. It's this moon rejoicing in the 3rd house that is then ruled by Mercury in the 10th. She's very known. She's a leader in this community. And, with the 11th house as well, there's really an association with organization. And again, Sun in Aquarius, she's this leader, which is also a leader of a group. The Sun is in detriment here, and Sun is opposing Saturn in detriment. And she's the leader of a group that goes through a lot in the war, first of all, who they really go through it. And also there's a lot of anonymity because of, that heavy makeup with that Venus in the first, that warrior makeup. You also see how there's an anonymity here. Sokka doesn't initially recognize Suki when he sees her for the second time. Also, we see Azula, Mei, and Ty Lee able to pose as Kyoshi warriors by putting on the makeup. There's a stripping of identity to sort of become part of the community and become part of the collective body, but she still takes on this leadership role. She's still trying to express her leadership, particularly with her chart ruler in the 10th and Mars being exalted in Cap. I think she's really able to succeed in being that leader despite being in this sort of anonymous space.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, also Suki is super no nonsense. She is pretty mature. She does not have the time to go on elephant koi fish like Aang. I mean, Aang didn't either, but Aang wrote on it anyway. But Suki has a very strong sense of duty that goes, that is more prevalent than her own sense of joy. Hence Saturn in the 5th house, she has a duty, and she's very no nonsense. And I think she's very sarcastic and very dry. We see her act so sarcastically when Sokka is just oh yeah, I'm better than you. I'm sexist. And she's just kind of okay, yeah, I'm totally terrible. Let's just, do it fair and square, knowing that she's going to kick his ass. Mm-hmm. So there is a dryness and sarcasm to Suki that makes her hilarious. And, her moon is in Gemini in the 3rd house, which really shows what you said, that really deep connection to her neighborhood and her deep sense of protecting it. So yeah, And then with her Venus being conjunct to Jupiter, like the way that she shows love is very obvious. I mean, it's in Aries, so like, you know, a lot of people on here very awkward with their love languages. It's all in Aries, man. And you know, when it comes to love languages and when it comes to, you know, being, you know, romantically in love with Sokka, it's very obvious, but it's also very awkward because like I don't think Sokka and her got super together until like book 3, like legit book 3. And like even when they are together, like there's the tense scene when like Zuko walks in and like he sees Sokka being like, ugh, like they're ready for sexy time. And like I see that awkwardness, and it's more just like, you know, Suki doesn't really get with Sokka till later on, but like when she does, it's really, really powerful because like a lot of what Suki does, you know, it's Venus and Aries. They show love by fighting for their partners, and if it means sacrifice, sacrifice will happen. She literally almost died at the very end, but she's still alive. So yeah, and that was for Sokka and Toph. So yeah, Sokka, like Suki's the type to, you know, not like she's willing to do it for the team. Like she is going to be the first person that dies in a horror movie, not because she's stupid, but she'll take it for the team. She is that person. And that's the epitome of an Aries rising. So yeah, that's my take on Suki. Do you have anything else you want to say about her?
Yeah, you know, I think just one other factor, you know, thinking about her relationship with Sokka is, you know, of course, we have this Mercury and Mars conjoined his moon, and her moon is in his first house conjoined his Mars. So there's like some tension there. There's some fire in their relationship. And also we see, you know, their Venus star square, his in Cancer, hers in Aries. And in a lot of cases we see her taking on the pursuer role. Like this is, you know, Venus in Aries, Venus in diurnal sign, and also, you know, her Venus is angular and it's overcoming Cancer by square. So Venus is in the superior position, so she really ends up being the pursuer in a lot of cases, and Sokka kind of ends up being the pursued, which I think is a really interesting dynamic that speaks a lot to, you know, who she is as a character, and you know what creates that like fun tension for her and Sokka.
Yeah, definitely. That actually makes a whole lot of sense because like it's interesting because Sokka really pursued Yue, but Suki really pursued Sokka. Thought it's very interesting. So yeah, let's go ahead and get to the next chart. I think this is our last one. Dun 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 dun. Boom! We got 2 charts.
Yes.
So we got Sozin and we got Roku. So just so you guys know, Sozin and Roku had the same birthday. And because they have the same birthday, they have very similar charts. But that doesn't mean they were born at the same time. So Sozin is an Aries ascendant while Roku is a Libra ascendant. And they're both a Sun in Aries, Moon in Capricorn, Moon in Aquarius, Mercury in Taurus, Venus in Aries, Mars in Capricorn, Jupiter in Pisces, and then Saturn in Gemini. Now, this is 2 different charts. I think we were kind of a genius to put them at opposing ascendants because like they ended up going through completely different paths in life. And they became 2 very different people, even though they have the same chart. So for any of those out there who are very into, you know, disproving twins in astrology, this might be your, you know, time to look at this podcast. Honestly, I want to interpret Roku first because every time I look at Roku's chart, I think of me because, you know, Libra ascendant, Sun in Aries. You know, Roku was somebody who regrets not attending to relationships whenever they became too toxic, and he was too scared to like not attend to Sozin enough, just because, you know, it's his past. Like Sozin was literally there from him since day one. He was his A1 day one, or day one A1. I don't know, other way around. But like when you look at the chart, you know, his Sun and Venus are in Aries in the 7th house, and the Lord of that 7th house is in the 4th house, which is Mars and Capricorn. Now, both Sozin and Roku were both very powerful at what they did, but they came out very differently. Sozin became really good at dominating the world, which is Mars in the 10th house. But then Roku was really good at, you know, mastering himself as a person. Self-mastery is what I would kind of like to tie to Roku. Well, Sozin mastered everything outside of him rather than himself. So that's my intro take on Sozin and Roku. But of course, I want to see what you think of these two peeps.
Yeah. So if you're not watching this on video, one thing that I just want to highlight is the fact that in Sozin's chart, every planet is on the left side of the MCIC axis, and on Roku's chart, every planet is on the right. And I think we do this, I don't think we do this intentionally, or it was kind of these stark hemispheric emphases, but it really speaks into a lot of ways how Roku had more of a focus on the world and on things outside of himself and on other people in the like seventh house side, and Sozin was more focused on himself. And we see, there's some really interesting contrasts when we flip these charts, because I think we thought it would just kind of be fun to like flip them and show them as these like this opposing but dynamic duo that was so similar but so different. Like we see, of course, in Roku's chart, Mars ruling the fourth, and a lot of what we see is Roku fighting for his home. Like he fights to preserve the Fire Nation, Mars and Capricorn. Capricorn has a lot to do with preservation, and he fights to preserve. He literally fights a volcano that's destroying his home, and that's how he dies, because, why not fight a volcano if you have Mars in the fourth house? Like, you could take the volcano. This is Mars and Capricorn in the fourth. Fight a volcano. Who cares? Versus we have Sozin, of course, Mars and Capricorn in the 10th. Of course, we're seeing a lot of 10th house Mars and a lot of Capricorn Mars. Of course, this is a show about wartime, and we're looking at a lot of the major figures in a war. So it's kind of, I want to justify, like, we're not just repeating ourselves, but every show has context, and that context I think can really inform the astrology of the people who are important in that context. And in this case, we're looking at a lot of warriors, a lot of fighters, a lot of people who go to war. And while Roku is fighting for his homeland, Sozin is fighting for this 10th house sense of power, for authority, for leadership. And he has this moon in the 11th house, again ruled by Saturn, and just really a focus on becoming a leader. It's an exalted sun in the first. Like he's powerful, and he really does want to maintain control, while Roku's sense of duty is kind of to the avatar. It's to the avatar's line, to spirituality. Roku has Saturn in the 9th house, ruled by Mercury in the 8th. Like, again, we're looking at issues of inheritance and issues of, in this case, a particularly spiritual inheritance of being the avatar. And that's his duty lies in that. Well, Sozin's duty lies much more in his homeland, in the Fire Nation. And, the ruler of the fourth is in the 11th. He wants to spread, because his initial, belief was that we're spreading the bounty of the Fire Nation. Like, the Fire Nation is prosperous, and we want to share that with the world. And Roku's like, wait a minute, you can't do that. Like, you can't just take over the world. But Sozin's like, but I want to.
Yeah. So for me personally, I'm gonna go through each planet really quickly and kind of show the foil. I'm gonna start with Jupiter, because Jupiter's funny. Mm-hmm. Because when I think of Sozin and his way of sharing the Fire Nation of the world, his Jupiter's in the 12th house. He doesn't know how to manage growth. So for you Jupiter in the 12th natives out there, you don't when it comes to handling a plant, when I think of Jupiter in 12th house, I think of a wild plant that's growing way too fast and you don't know what to do with it. I think of puberty. Mm-hmm. And the Fire Nation was going through its puberty stages, and Sozin's let's make it worse. And then Roku's no, we gotta snip it. We gotta tame the nation. But Sozin's no, let's pick it up. And then Roku has Jupiter in the 6th house, and we chose the 6th house mainly because, Roku became very accustomed to many different lifestyles. He was pretty adjustable. He went to the Water Nation, the Air Nomads, the Earthbenders. He really adjusted to every other area of life, and that really contributed to his mastery. Even though he kind of struggled with some elements, he kind of had not a terrible time traveling around and mastering all 4 elements. Now, with the moon, it's really interesting. I like to look at their 11th houses because they were most known as friends. And Sozin has his moon in the 11th house. What I think was so painful is that when Sozin, in my opinion, killed Roku at the very end, I am pretty sure that it really killed Sozin on the inside. Because Roku really meant so much to Sozin, and his moon's in the 11th house, but his moon is Saturn ruled. And Saturn is in his 3rd house, which shows that, you know, while he does care about Roku, the notions of his culture, the notions of imperialist, you know, Fire Nation values will still trump over the friendship. And because of that, you know, Sozin did care about Roku, but he kind of was under the power of like Fire Nation customs. And then Roku's moon is in Aquarius and in the 5th house. Roku just wanted to be happy. He wanted, but at the same time though, his weight was on the weight of the world. The world had more priority than his own self-happiness. And then Leo rules over Roku's 11th house. Not attending to Sozin was Roku's biggest regret, and I think he tied that into his identity. And of course, that regret is going to go into Aang. So there's the transitive part in that. And then with Mars, you know, I think I already talked about Mars, so I'm going to skip over that. But one thing that I did want to notice is that I think Roku's biggest mistake was trying to preserve the past of Sozin and his friendship rather than seeing their relationship as it was now. That's what, in my opinion, was his mistake. He tried to preserve what they once were when they were already grown up and they couldn't go back. Roku was trying to preserve a past that he could not get back to. It was familiar, but it's not there anymore. So there's that to consider. And then the last thing is that Roku is a Taurus Mercury, and then they're both Taurus Mercuries, and then Sozin has it in the 2nd house, while Roku has it in the 8th house. I feel like when it comes to whoever was more deceiving, I felt like Roku was a bit more gullible than Sozin was. Sozin knew how to get his way. Mercury in Sozin's chart is the lord of the 3rd house and the 6th house. Like, Sozin had more leverage when it came to, you know, channeling his Mercury according to his customs and his lifestyle. For Roku, his Mercury is the lord of the 9th house, and let me see, the 9th house, and where's Virgo? And the 12th house. And those are cadent houses. So, you know, actually, was it also cadent for, it's also cadent for Sozin, but for Roku's case, he was better at being the world's spokesperson, but with, you know, Mercury being the lord of the 12th house, like the 12th house is kind of like the prison. It's kind of the place of unfamiliarity. Roku was better at looking at the future and seeing what could happen. Sozin was better at creating an environment for the present. But Sozin had no idea how to approach the future. And that's why Roku like flipped out. But yeah, that's honestly my take on Sozin and Roku.
Yeah. I think you really covered pretty much everything. One thing I just thought about is, of course, they're both, you know, ancestors of Zuko. Like, Zuko is a descendant of both of them. And interestingly, you know, if we think about the 5th house as children, and, you know, I think we are allowed to extrapolate that to grandchildren and great-grandchildren, but the lords of the 5th house in both these charts, the Sun and Saturn, are conjoined in Zuko's 10th house. So we see a little bit of that inheritance.
I mean, the inheritance was everywhere. Like, we got the moon and Leo. We got, you know, honor, all the Mars. Like, we got that 3rd house history. Like, the royal family's they're a bit. So yeah, I think that is pretty much it. These are the charts that we chose to cover. Unfortunately, you know, if we had the time to cover the Cabbage Man, it would be way too long of an episode. I was thinking about the Cabbage Man because there is always someone out there who was looking for the Cabbage Man.
I know.
Unfortunately, the Cabbage Man will not be observed this time around. And just to clarify, I mean, this episode is probably almost 3 hours long, if I know my time right. And there will be an episode on Korra, just not in this episode because my throat is starting to hurt. So, Adina, do you have any final thoughts about any of the characters in the chart? Is there any chart that you want to go back to, or do you feel like we covered them to a T?
I think we were thorough. We got through everything. I just want to say, you know, I hope people out there listening maybe agree with some of our takes, or if you disagree, we're not the final arbiters of like what the charts are for these characters. We just kind of took a whack at, what would a complete chart look like for all these people. So I feel like if people have opinions, they should, come to us on Twitter, come discuss, come debate, join the conversation, and think about, what we did, because I had a lot of fun making these and trying to think through how to tell these stories through these charts. And yeah, I really enjoyed this experience.
Yeah, honestly, doing the charts for Avatar it's been super fun, and it's also been challenging because we kind of had to like, not be too biased in our takes and kind of like separate ourselves and be like, let's look at these people as actual people. And honestly, of course, seconding what Adina said, these are not like, the chart of the characters. We're both Martian, so please like entertain us. Like, please debate with us. Like, we love to debate on things. We like to be spicy. And, if you guys have any questions or you guys have feedback, like I'm going to post, the charts on Twitter so you guys can look at it and debate all you want or like it all you want. Because I mean, personally, whenever I finally saw the charts in person, because Adina made them, by the way, thank you so much. Like when I saw the charts, I just kind of sat there and I was like, these are good. Like these charts are good. Like I was proud of both of us and the amount of effort that we did to make all of these charts. And holy hell, it's gonna get super exciting, whenever, if I ever have the time to cover Korra. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm pretty good. I'm also a little bit poos, but I'm also feeling amazing. Do you have anything else you want to say, Adina? You want to remind people about your social media before we end this episode?
Oh, yes. Well, first of all, thank you so much. I am also, a little tired and hungry, but also super energized. This is so much fun. Loved having this conversation again and, thinking through this with you. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Adina Rising. You can find my website, adinahertzel.space. And yes, it is .space because I got the .space domain name. And yeah, talk to me on Twitter, talk to me on Instagram, book a reading with me if you want to talk about your chart like this. And yeah, just thank you so much.
Yeah, personally, as a person who has been read by Adina, not formally, but just for funds, she's going to blow you away. I mean, she blew me away. So yeah, for anyone who made it to the end, holy crap, thank you so much for watching this whole thing with us. And I'm gonna go off and eat some dinner. So you have a great rest of your night, Adina.
You too, Alexis.
Okay, bye guys. I'll see you guys at our next episode, whenever that is. Who knows? Goodbye, guys.